Welcome everyone. We appreciate you joining us here for the last presentation of Immersive Edge this weekend. Today we have Ford Fredericks from the Outworlds grid with us. He created, I would say he's the father of animated animals in OpenSim. And he's done some amazing things like create the shape-shifting avatars and a wonderful all-in-one controller that is at the heart of so much of what we've done here with Immersive Edge. So I'm going to turn you over to Fred, and we'll hear him talk about how he did all this.
Well, hello, everybody. I also answer to Fred or Ferd all the time. Well, I've been scripting in virtual worlds for about 10 years now, from back in the early Second Life days. You probably first knew me from the open source scripts that I maintain over at outworlds.com website. I've kind of grown that into textures and mesh lately, so a lot of people find me that way, and hopefully it attracts some more people over here to OpenSim. Well, today I'm going to go over some of the features of the NPC controller that we developed some while back to run the Outworlds. It's been spun out in several different versions. I think we're at version 4.9 now, so that's about 50 different major revs. We've used it an awful lot in the Hypergrid stories as an engine to run all these non-player characters, the gadgets that you see running around in the stories. So next slide, please, Nara. So there's a few of the scripts for the NPC controllers that we used over in the Hypergrid stories. A lot of that code found its way over from the Outworlds, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity to contribute. It's open source, it needs to be used, it needs to be beat up on, and I really need the feedback from people to help improve it. So I'll touch up on a few of these scripts and a few that didn't make it to the stories, but my focus today is going to be on the all-in-one recorder. I'm mainly going to talk about it, where it came from, what's changed recently, and also a little bit about where it's going. So hang on to your questions until the very end. I'll be happy at that time to answer any general questions you might have. I'm going to try and keep this at a fairly high level due to the short period of time and the general audience. If you got any deep questions that are beyond that level, then go ahead and speak with me afterwards or email me. I'm fred@mitsi.com, FRED@MITSI. And I'll be happy to help with you in any way I can. So let's go in, Nara, with the next slide, please. There's a I haven't seen it switch for me, Nara. We are on the other NPC. There we go. Let's see, the original script that I started with came from Wizardry and Steamworks, a place called GRIMORE.org, grimoire.org. Let me put that into the chat for you. That is a very lovely little site. They write some really great code. They opened their source up and made it GNU, the GNU GPL, which means that you have the freedom to run, copy, distribute it, study, change, and improve the software, which we've been doing for about 2 years now. So I've also open sourced a lot of these other scripts that you see up here. You can get them from the library from me over in the Outworlds. We used some of these on the first slide in the story. A lot of these didn't make the cut, like the rideable tigers that we made for Nara, or any of the cows and elephants. Unfortunately, no one seemed to design those into her story, so they're left out. Nara, if you would, the next slide, please. So let's talk about the all-in-one NPC recorder a little bit. What it is a engine, a runtime engine. It actually has a computer inside of it, a computer within a computer, and it extends the LSL language beyond the geekiness that people are used to. There's some 27 now high-level commands. They're at commands. So all you need to make it work is one script, a walk animation, and a stand animation. And that's going to get you a working NPC. You can take it and slide it around the ground and click it. You can wear it as a HUD display, fly around with it, and make a path. That's really the hardest thing in making NPCs, is programming them to go and move and do things. So after you record the program, you click the Save button, and then you click Start, and your NPC is going to appear and follow all your instructions. Now this simplifies a lot of the tasks that you normally have. These are like macro-like commands that it creates. We'll show a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. Recorder will automatically fix up a lot of the issues with NPCs and scripting. It'll save everything in a note card. And what's kind of cool about that is Modern computers don't make a distinction between the program and the data. The program can produce the data, which can become the program. So you can actually use the program to write your note card, run the note card, which can create another program. So it actually allows you to build very powerful computer programs inside the engine and grow it in ways that the original people like Alan Turing and others, computer pioneers, define the language. So if you would, the next slide, please, Nara. So here's our very simplest sort of a note card. It's nothing more than a spawn, first name, last name, and a coordinate. Some kind of command, and typically this is what we did in Hypergrid Stories. We stop right there. The NPC will simply appear, say hello world, and be standing there. This causes it to sounds pretty useless, actually. It just stops. We put that in there because it would normally loop back to the beginning, and it would repeat the word hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world over and over again. So the stop makes it quit processing and shut down. It's also a really good feature because to start it back up again, we added link messages. Programmers in the audience here will know what a link message is, and I'll talk about that a little bit more because it's really the key to these things. Nara, if you would, the next slide. So here is another very simple one. This is a dance ball. We're all familiar with pose balls. Basically, all you have to do is spawn an NPC at some location, tell it to sit on the dance ball, and then play an animation for some period of time. This will fall off the end of the note card, loop around, sit on the dance ball, animate itself for a period of time. And that's essentially what it takes to make a pose ball for an NPC dancer. You can grow this in a lot of different ways. You can put a stop, for example. He'll dance for 10 seconds and stop. You can add more animations and play a whole sequence of them and so on. But it's a very simple, easy thing to do in this language. So, okay, the next slide, please. So we'd like our NPC to be able to communicate with people. After all, it's got to tell a story to our audience over in the this particular sim arrangement we just did. We had to work with the writers to come up with various chat and shouted and whispered things at various stages in the game. And so this lets them interact with people. They really need to communicate. They need to have inputs as well as outputs like this. So I'll go over to the inputs here in just a minute. But the big difference between NPCs and this recorder are these commands that you can inject in it. So if you would, the next slide, please. This gives them a lot of uses when you can do inputs and outputs. So here is the first little tip I'm going to show you today. We use invisible prims throughout this whole region, and I use them throughout the Virungas. So when you walk around, you're actually bumping into invisible objects. So I had a fairy chat bot. You can see on the screen at the far right a little blue prim. That's the invisible prim. When you walk into that, it wakes the chat bot up, tells it to say something like, hello, stay with me. It's very lonely here in the forest. You stop. You talk to it, it talks back. You know how chatbots start and say something only if you talk to them. This injects a command, a one-line command at, say, it's very lonely into the forest, into the stream that the NPC uses. So it's essentially the same script you saw earlier where she sits on the log and waits. And it actually, the program is much more complicated than this. It spawns the fairy, sits on the tree trunk and stops. And then commands are injected in from an ordinary chatbot script. What's kind of cool about that is that the chatbot now is in white text, and you can really hard to tell these from an avatar. So Nara, if you would, the next slide, please. Now we want to get our NPCs to move about. So some of the things that came out of this interactive stories, the Hypergrid stories, was the writers needed to move the avatars a long ways away, the NPCs away from the start, to carry you on a tour, and then somehow zoop them back to the beginning very quick. And so people like Neo and Anya Kimi, I can't really say her name, Anya Kimi, never mind, I can never say it. Anya and Neo and Seth and others, and Nara, of course, and the other writers needed these things. So we added things like the teleport command to zoom them back to the beginning or go somewhere else. That was really good because I ended up using it in Hypergrid 9. The speed command was used for tinies. You can make giants and tinies speed up and slow down, like a little tiny turtle or a rabbit, like I have in various places, or like little tiny fairies. They move much slower than you would want. They don't want to zoom right by you. And then, of course, they added the touch command, which is the last one, which is a very useful movement kind of command because it can move doors. It can move a car. It can open a car door. The NPC can sit in the seat. It can touch the door to close it and drive off. It's a very nice command to add it. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of things about the cards you need to know when you're developing these note cards. There's two kinds of movements for NPCs. One is relative to the sim, and one is relative to the prim. Now, with absolute motion, when you click the menu, you set it for absolute. It's really useful for things like stairways, tour guides. If you need to get your little tiny ferry to go right in that little ferry door, you need to record the exact coordinate of that door on your sim. This is great. It's easy. You can just copy and paste them from the viewer. Like Phoenix has a little copy button there on your screen. So I usually, if you were watching me when I built this, there were prims everywhere. I made phantom prims, put them where I wanted the NPCs to move from A to B to C to D to E to F to G, and I would just click them and copy and paste them into the note card by hitting the little C button there. Now, it sounds complicated, but that made it really, really easy. Okay? So why would you need the other motion type, which is relative? Next slide, please. Relative motion spawns them relative to the NPC box itself. This is how I make herds of animals, like the zebras. I'll tell you a really quick story. The first night we set up animals. It was a bunch of zebras. I set them up, shift copy, shift copy, shift copy. A bunch of zebras follow the sty. They all start wandering around everywhere for 5 meters for 6 seconds. Then they would repeat. They'd move 5 around, move around, move around. I built a huge herd with just a couple of shift clicks. Okay, Nora, next one, please. You can build upon this with the all-in-one, like, for example, to make an I Love You follower. There's some of these are floating around in the Outworlds. They didn't make it into the world here, this game, but they're quite useful. It's basically you spawn an animal, tell it to walk very close to where the box is, and then you put a simple follower script in that box and make it invisible. The box finds the avatar, the little sheep finds you, comes up and back and plays with you and follows you everywhere you go. You can play with some of the timings and things like that to get it to lag behind you or go to the right or the left or in front, so on like that. Next slide, please. So, I spent about the last year refactoring this script. This means recompile it from the original Wizardry and Streamworks factor so we could easily add commands. It was really needed for the Hypergrid stories. So what it does is it accepts inputs from a bunch of other scripts. I think we used every one of these. Note cards are obviously an input, but you can touch certain things, sit on things. A lot of invisible colliders, which I'll show you in a minute. There's a timer that Shin Engine made just before he injured his leg, and I took over 9 from him that controls a bunch of these NPCs. There's sensors. People can chat to them to control them. And there's also a web server tied in so that when you bump or things happen at a web server and it sends a response, and depending on the things you've clicked, it causes the NPC to chat to you as well. So, for example, it can make a NPC using the @say command say hello world whenever you walk into a room. It could be when you land at the teleport gate, we want it to speak. There were some real challenges that the writers came up for us that were kind of hard to get around. This made it really, really easy. So at the next slide, please, you'll see what the difference is we can now add multiple NPC controllers. It's just a prim with the script and some animations in it. You shift copy it several times. I think the most we used was 10, might be 8 NPCs. Like this in parallel, and it was 10 colliders, a sequencer, a listener, and 8 NPCs, I believe. So what you do is you send a message to all of them with link set, and all the NPCs will react. So for example, you could say @delete, and they'll all go away. It's a very simple link message. Link message @delete, they're gone. Link message @say hello world, they'll all reappear and they'll all say hello world. But you can also address them by number, and in the last script I did, you can actually address them by name. So you would say link set, you would put a name in to a function call, how long you want it to say it, and then the string. So next slide, please. There's a lot of sequencer code built for this thing, by the way. Neo and Anya came up with totally new stuff built on my work and fed it back to me, and then I made changes and fed it back to them. So we've got, I think, 3 sequencers also involved, along with all these colliders and such like that. So here's a typical scene. This is the entrance to Hypergrid 3 where you land in an area. And the writers had a really tough challenge with this with me. They want you to sit there, res in, then when you move, have a story start, and they want the raccoon to lead you down a path. That's all done by a couple of colliders, the NPC controllers, and some simple note cards. So next slide, please. This is the actual invisible layout. The round ring is where you land. There's some spoilers here in case nobody didn't realize this. The round ring is where you land. If you walk down the path after listening to the story, you'll bump into that collider that's running vertically on the screen, and that will cause the raccoon to lead you down the path. It's kind of difficult to have a raccoon anticipate where you're going. By this way, when you bump into that primp, he turns around and leads you ahead of you. There's more colliders down the path. As you progress down the path, he'll wait for you at the next collider prim. If you reach a certain spot, he'll then move forward and tempt you to go forward to the forest. The one that is down at the bottom is designed to block you off from falling in the water. The water is very deadly in that sim, and that warns you to go back. And then over on the upper right-hand corner, you can see 3 NPC controllers for Namaka, Dylan, and the raccoon as well. And also in this scene, there is one of these standalone Anya's pose balls, which runs the pointing trees. And I believe there is a little chatbot right around the corner as well. So next slide, please. This is the collider placement in scene 9. I think there's 10 colliders, 8 NPCs, all controlled by note cards in one script. This is pretty straightforward to develop once you sort of get a written story. So there's a lot of stuff done here in these various sims. There's 10 sims worth, some with multiple levels, all of them using NPCs to tell story with a variety of these scripts. It's difficult for people to figure this out, even people who have 40 years of experience writing code. So I wanted to pass on a few tips for you today about some of the things I've found over the last couple of years, as well as from the Hypergrid stories. So Nara, if you would, the next slide, please. This is what you do, what happens when you forget to take your HUD off. You get rabbits. You get great big piles of rabbits or turtles or something like that. If you're wearing the recorder and you click record appearance, it's going to record you wearing the recorder, which when you res the recorder, will res you with the recorder, which will res whatever you used to have. It becomes rabbits all the way down rather quickly over time. There's a large pile of them at the base of the mountain as well. I've had turtles do this to me and rabbits. It took me a long time to figure out what was causing this. I am not a very smart man when it comes to detecting rabbit and turtle recursion. Let me tell you that, boy. So Narn, if you would please, the next slide. There's another couple of tips for NPCs. Most of us will know that now who play with it, but take off all your HUDs. Get rid of all your scripts. Look in your shoes and get rid of those evil resizers that in there. Go ahead and take everything that you're wearing off and put it back on again, particularly when you move from one grid to another and you wish to reconstruct it. Take it off, put it on, take it off again. This records the position and the appearance and any changes. If you edit your hair, take it off and put it on again, and then record your appearance, and it'll come out correct every time. Something else, originally when I started this, I thought we were going to create a bunch of note cards and call note cards to note cards. We ended up basically all of them being res the NPC and stop, or res the NPC and delete, and then we wrote other note cards and scripts to change that. So there's the boot note cards, very, very simple. I'd suggest you do something like spawn and stop, and then go write you another note card and link it in. And then, but we also added one other command, come to think of it, which is the reset. You'll see a bug in OpenSim where you see unknown user. So we periodically will inject that into the NPC systems now, and that'll reset them and bring back the real NPC. So next slide, please. So there's a couple of things you need to know. You need to make your NPCs walk. They don't walk as easy as avatars, so I used a lot of prims like this and made everything phantom. And you should do this right now. Go to your sims, make everything phantom, and rebuild everything with prims. Your NPCs, your avatars, and your CPU will love you. Next slide, please. NPCs don't update as quickly as avatars, so they will fall through things like mesh and floors, particularly if it's twisted in the X and the Y direction. Watch out for that. In the Oh Frankie game, I moved land up underneath various things. I went through scenes 3 and 9, got rid of almost all of the mesh by making it prims, made it flat, and then the NPCs work a lot smoother. They don't jump in the air and hop like they used to. If you would, another one, please. Nora, thank you. There's some new things that are going to be coming out in the NPC Recorder, I hope. I'm hoping some members of this audience will jump in like Neo and Anya did and help write code for the controller and publish it. I'd like people to take some of the other, there's probably a dozen, maybe 24 scripts involved just with the NPC controller and work with them and feed them back to us. I'd like to see some of the other ones used as well. There's a whole bunch of NPC action going on right now. I'd be happy to help anybody with this or any of the others. I'm trying to keep hosting them on the website as well. And I'm trying to add new commands that people ask. It's really important that we get feedback from the community. So I'm thinking some of the commands would be sync, like sync up all the NPCs so that they all like march in a band, and when they turn the corner, obviously the one on the outside has to travel longer to get around the corner. I'd like to sync them up again. I'd like to have a follow. I can do follows now with other scripts, but follow is basically like lead or attack by just changing the coordinates. It's kind of a half-baked idea. I don't think we're ever going to see pathfinding, but there are people out there who are smarter than me who know about LL Castray and its successes, who can inject commands into an NPC and have them figure out where to go and wander around autonomously. That would be nice to see. So next slide, please. This is some other stuff I'm working on now that I'm finally, this just came out as a matter of fact. This will be out next week, I think, in the Avatar Fest. It's a NPC skeleton fighting game. There is one script that runs the game. It reses a box, which is assigned to, let's say, Nara over there because she's closest to it. That box will then create an NPC and go attack Nara with a pirate skeleton and a sword trying to push her off this ship. Now, if you can get to the top of this ship and click the little treasure chest, you'll get a prize. It's coming out next week. I have this in the Outworlds. It's a lovely little NPC. It's about 100 lines of code. It's amazing little code to do this. So the next slide, please. That just came out. What else just came out using NPCs is a couple of more levels in the Outworld's Frankie Sim. These are very simple things that I got actually back from Hypergrid Stories. Some of the snakes and animals that we built over there are now back in the Outworlds. So it's a nice big open source. I do things for you, you do things for me, everybody benefits. So come get some of these in our new store that we're announcing. I'll have some NPCs for people to take as well and some scripts on the website. Another one, please. Thank you, Nora. Just also recently completed some Machinima. I really love NPCs for Machinima. They're absolutely wonderful. It was much easier than working with people. It was a lot more fun working with people. With NPCs, I had to do some great stuff. This was an old British television show called Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, and a British friend of ours asked us to help make a little movie of it, bring them into a modern time. So we had Bill and Ben smash out of their old black and white TV set, come into the modern color world, and then go on a rampage in the garden. We had great fun doing it with NPCs. The next slide, please. We've almost got a Dinotopia ready, and we're almost ready to develop the Outworlds, the final Outworlds section of our hotel, our elephants. So a lot of the stuff we're doing with Hypergrid Stories is being fed back to the Virungas. We have the technology now. We have a lot of NPC things we can do. It's simply a matter of sitting down and applying them and using them. So I'd like you to eventually come by our virtual Africa and find our endangered mountain gorillas of the Virungas and go shoot them with cameras. They'll all be NPCs, and it should be great fun. So thank you for listening and coming with me. I'm going to open the floor to questions. And remember, contact me, Fred, at mitsi.com, M-I-T-S-I, with bugs and fixes and questions. I'll be happy to answer any way I can. Thank you very much.
Okay, if you'll just put your questions in chat and I'll read them aloud and Fred will answer them. And hear the audience cheering. They love you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. It's been a lot of fun doing this. It really has.
Okay, Ruby asks, what would we have done without you? Wept a lot. Sunbeam
thank you very
says you're
much.
the Da Vinci of OpenSim.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Actually, it's not me so much as I just have a very large Google page rank on the website. People like scripts. I started that script library, 5 years ago, and put a bunch of small scripts online. And then I started writing scripts. I've been writing them for a while. And I think there's over 500 authors there now. I spent a lot of time on that website trying to get the page rank going, and we did about 1.4 million page hits last year on the scripting library, and it was really quite
Wow.
nice to see.
That's
You know,
amazing.
so yeah, it is amazing. If it's a small world, even Second Life plus OpenSim together is still a small world, but everybody needs them. I've really appreciated the feedback. It's always been incredibly positive.
Well, you make it easy for us to do, and this NPC controller is so easy. Shannon and I like to say it's so easy as romance writers can do it. We figured it out. We think anybody can figure it out.
Oh yeah, I don't want to fail to mention Neo. Neo took this thing and ran off with it, and probably did, I don't know, 4 or 5 sims worth of it. I got trapped into 3 for a long time, and then did 9, and along comes Neo and made a bunch of changes. Anya did too. It's been fun to work on. They've come up with some really neat stuff. Shin Engine came up with a very lovely little timer that you'll notice. If you go to scene 9, I think after this they're going to take everybody on another tour that hasn't been. Go to scene 9 and look at the console in the middle. There's a lovely little timer in there that pretty much runs everything. Love that. That's all open source. It's all going to go on the Outworld's website here, hopefully this afternoon or tomorrow. That's also backed up on the GitHub. The entire library is available for anyone to download. It's about, I don't know, there's a couple of 100 megabytes worth of stuff just in the script library alone. So if you want to go to GitHub and look it up and grab it, go right ahead. Yeah, that's the idea. You're absolutely right there, Neo. It's the spirit of working together. I've really enjoyed the cooperation. It's been difficult sometimes to listen to Nara, and she's talking in poetry, and it's like hard to make poetry. The script is like, we want these 2 guys to do this, and they're going to burst into flames. Okay, I got the flames part, but they're in a forest. Forest and flames don't mix. Well, that kind of went over everybody's head real quick. Okay, there's flames in a forest, but we were able to build on that and work out
But
a
it was
story.
a swamp.
Well, yeah, but the water's down below, so crocodiles went in there. And eventually, it took a while, but we came up with, I think, a really nice piece of the story there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Thank you very
right. I
much,
think
Nara.
we're
I really
gonna
appreciate it.
thank you for helping us out, Fred.